I came across this story, and what struck me immediately was how carefully structured it is. The author doesn't bury the tension. She places it right in the opening, like someone who's been carrying weight for so long she can barely hold it anymore. Let me walk you through this with you. Our narrator is 32. She's engaged to a 28-year-old man, and they've been living together for 2 years. But their history stretches further back, half a decade of on-and-off connection before they committed to sharing space. And for the past year and a half, she's been carrying something that's grown too heavy to ignore. She works full-time, the kind of demanding job that drains you completely by the time you walk through your door at the end of the day. And the pay, it barely covers both of them. They're living paycheck to paycheck. No cushion, no breathing room, no savings. When he moved from out of state to be with her, the plan was simple. He'd find at least part-time work, something that would let them live comfortably, maybe even save a little. Notice how modest that goal was. Not wealth, not luxury, just comfort, just a little security. But here's where the narrative begins to fracture. A year and a half passes. He's been looking for work, she's seen the evidence, she's checked, but in 18 months, he's managed only a handful of interviews. Think about that timeline. 18 months of searching and almost nothing to show for it. His work history tells its own story. He's never held a job for more than a year consecutively. He has a high school equivalency, no college degree. And when she tries to help him figure out what he wants to do with his life, she realizes he's just telling her what he thinks she wants to hear. He says he wants to go into IT. She supports that. But when it comes time to actually research programs, actually apply, nothing happens because it turns out he never really wanted it at all. He just thought it was something he could do. So she gives him 2 weeks. 2 weeks to research career paths and pick something he can actually see himself doing. Something real. And after she pushes him, he finally chooses YouTube. Now I want you to notice her response here. She doesn't dismiss it. She acknowledges that some people make a real living this way. He has friends who do. And she's had people support her dream job, so she decides to do the same for him. They buy him a nice microphone. The agreement is clear. If they invest in this equipment, he'll commit to the YouTube path. She even tells him he doesn't need to apply for jobs for 6 months while he gets it started. 6 months of full support to build something. A month later, the uploads have already become inconsistent. The excuses pile up. The thing about his videos is that they barely require editing. He records, checks the sound, and uploads. That's it. So the barrier to consistency is remarkably low. She has another conversation. Why isn't this happening? And when they dig deeper, he reveals there's a mental block tied to his emotionally abusive childhood. She understands trauma. She works with children who have experienced it. She studied how trauma affects the brain and behavior. She's lived through childhood issues herself, so she tries to be understanding. But here's what she says next, and this matters. She doesn't think trauma should be an excuse, not indefinitely. Not when someone is asking you to show up for your own life. So he still says he wants YouTube, but nothing is being done. For a while, he claims he's watching other videos to research. Even if she believed that, and the narrative suggests she's trying to, it goes on for far too long to be reasonable. After months of talking to her therapist about this, she arrives at a realization. She's okay with him not working, but if he's not going to work, she wants him to do 90% of the cleaning. She wants the house to be clean. He agrees. And then the story cuts off. Mid-sentence, the house being bare, notice what the author does here structurally. She's built this entire narrative, layer by layer, showing us the pattern. The promises, the excuses, the mental blocks, the lack of follow-through. And just when she's about to tell us whether this new agreement actually changed anything, the story stops. But we already know the answer, don't we? Because the title told us from the beginning. My fiancé repeatedly does not clean the house. The word repeatedly carries the whole weight of the story. It's not that he didn't clean once. It's that this is a pattern, a cycle that keeps repeating no matter what agreement they make. What strikes me most about this narrative is how much labor she's doing. Not just the physical labor of working full-time to support them both, but the emotional labor of trying to help him figure out his life. The mental labor of problem-solving, of offering solutions, of creating opportunities for him to succeed, the constant work of believing in someone who isn't showing up for himself. And all of this while she's exhausted from a demanding job that barely pays enough. All of this while they have no savings, no cushion, no security. The pattern she's describing is what some call weaponized incompetence, when someone consistently fails to do something, not because they can't, but because if they do it badly enough or inconsistently enough, someone else will eventually stop asking, when the failure itself becomes a strategy. But here's what makes this story complex. He's not a cartoon villain, he has real trauma, real struggles, and she knows that. She sees it. The question the story asks, without asking it directly, is this: at what point does understanding someone's pain stop being compassion and start being complicity in your own exhaustion? She's been frustrated for a year and a half. That's how the story opens. Not angry, frustrated. Frustration is what happens when you keep trying and nothing changes. When you keep hoping and the hope keeps being disappointed. Anger is hot and sharp. Frustration is the slow burn that comes from caring about someone who won't care for themselves, and she's still calling him her fiancé. Still planning a future with someone who can't seem to show up for the present. The beauty and the heartbreak of this narrative is how clearly she sees the situation. She's not in denial. She's documenting the pattern with remarkable clarity, but seeing the pattern and being able to change it are two different things entirely. What unfolds here is a story about what happens when love meets logistics, when emotional commitment collides with practical reality. When the person you care about is drowning and pulling you under with them, and you have to decide whether you're going to keep trying to save them or save yourself. Stories like this remind us why we tell them in the first place, because they honor the complexity of being human, the way we can see clearly and still struggle to act. The way we can be strong in every area of our lives except the one that matters most. The way trauma echoes through relationships, creating patterns that feel impossible to break. And sometimes, the most important moment in a story is when someone finally puts it into words, when they stop carrying it alone and speak it out loud, because that's often the first step toward change. Not the change itself, but the acknowledgement that change is necessary. If you've experienced something like this, if you found yourself carrying weight that isn't yours to carry, if you've watched someone you love fail to show up for themselves or for you, if you've wondered when understanding becomes enabling, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How did you recognize the pattern? What helped you move forward? And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing, because stories like this matter. They show us we're not alone in the complicated work of loving imperfect people while trying to protect ourselves. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one. Title suggestions primary. He promised to clean while I worked full-time. Here's what actually happened. Alt 1. I supported his dreams for 18 months. The house stayed dirty. Alt 2. When your partner won't work or clean. A story about breaking points. Alt 3. The pattern that finally made me question everything.